So to start us off, it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Tony Capon. Professor Tony Capon directs the Monash Sustainable Development Institute and holds a chair in planetary health in the School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine at Monash University. He's a public health physician, an authority in environmental health and health promotion, and his research focuses on urbanization, sustainable development, and human health. Tony is a former director of the International Institute for Global Health at United Nations University. So please join me in welcoming Professor Tony Capon.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Ali, and thanks to Jackie and the whole organising team for inviting me along today. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we're on today, the Ngunnawal people, and we need to understand that their stewardship of these lands over millennia is why we're here and why we are enjoying this high standard of well-being in Australia. But as Ken Henry said yesterday, we're undermining those natural systems, and that through the Measuring What Matters process, oh, sorry, my slide's not moving down here, it's just moving up there. Let me just go back. Through the Measuring What Matters process, we want to get a much sharper focus on how to ensure that we at least understand the importance of these issues and think about how we might address them. This slide I want to put up, Gavin's from yesterday, the visual image, and yesterday I was online. I wasn't able to be here with you in person, but I thought Ken gave a terrific opening for this conference, and naturally this session very much builds on what Ken said yesterday. In this short talk, I think I've got about 15 minutes in total. I wanted to do 5 things. I want to make sure we're all on the same page with the challenge of the Anthropocene, to reflect a bit on sustainable development as a concept, and then to spend a bit of time on the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment work. And as we start to ask the question about measuring what matters, are we measuring the well-being of people and planet? And then finally, so what? I did want to start with some images from the 2019-2020 bushfire season here in Australia. Here an image from the far south coast of New South Wales, people sheltering on a beach. Sydney shrouded in smoke for months. And here in Canberra, people wearing masks to protect themselves from the bushfire smoke before we were regularly wearing masks to protect ourselves from the pandemic virus. And these were the images in the media around the world that summer. Those fires made clear to us that our climate's already changed and it's harming our health and the health of all other living creatures on Earth. It's estimated by ecologists that more than 1 billion animals died, more than 3 billion animals died in those fires. At the beginning of 2020, the rains came and doused the fires, and within weeks we were grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic. And that has been, obviously, from a public health point of view, I'm a public health physician myself, enormously important that we put in place control measures, but it's preoccupied us for several years now. More recently, we've been grappling with floods along the east coast of Australia. Here, images from Lismore. The fires, the floods, and the pandemic are all symptoms of what Earth scientists now call the Anthropocene. Our Earth science colleagues are arguing that we're leaving the Holocene epoch, an epoch that is considered the Goldilocks epoch for life on Earth, not too hot, not too cold. And we're entering a new epoch where we're changing Earth systems to such an extent that it'll be seen in the fossil record in times to come. Ken referred to the work of the World Commission on Environment and Development yesterday, the report Our Common Future in 1987. And here's a picture of Dr. Gro Brundtland, who chaired that work. And it's notable that she was a medical doctor from Norway before she went on to be Prime Minister, to chair this commission, and later to head the World Health Organization. And I make that point because the whole idea of sustainable development is about human well-being through the generations, as Ken said yesterday. There was a key part of what they were striving for through that work was to get a focus on future generations, not just well-being now. And importantly as well, some years later, when Kofi Annan was leading the UN, he called a Millennium Ecosystem Assessment process. And this is one of the parts of that, a report, a synthesis report on ecosystems and human well-being. And you can see here, you won't be able to read all these words, but Parthas Dasgupta, who was mentioned yesterday by Ken Henry, the economist from Cambridge, was one of the contributors. Tony McMichael, very eminent Australian environmental epidemiologist, also one of the leaders of this work. And I put it up because the links between ecosystem services and human well-being have been conceptualized through this work and subsequent work 20 or so years ago. So on the left here, I won't go through this in all detail, but you can obviously see where you can find more information. But you've got ecosystem services here, supporting services, nutrient cycling, soil formation. Apologies, as I am into my 60s now, I find it hard to read these very small words myself here. And primary production. Then on the right there, the provisioning services, the food we eat, the fresh water, wood and fibre, fuel. In the middle, really important regulating services, including climate regulation, flood regulation, disease regulation. I referred to the pandemic before, water, and then the cultural dimensions, how ecosystem services are relevant in a cultural context. And over here on the right-hand side, various constituents of human well-being. You can see there's security. You can see basic material for good life, health, and good social relations. And then freedom of choice and action, which is ultimately where we're headed in this work. But in the middle here are the various connections between these ecosystem services and human health and well-being, highlighted by the width of the arrow in terms of the strength of the relationship and by the colour in terms of potential for socioeconomic mediation. So I think this work, as I said, now 20 years old, is a really important foundational work for thinking conceptually about what we measure in measuring what matters. And of course, that work has also informed the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which all countries signed up to, including Australia, in 2015. But many folks think about these SDGs as just for low and middle income countries, but they're just as important for us here in Australia. We're a developed country, but we're not sustainably developed. And again, through the lens of human health, the World Health Organization encourages us to understand that we can use this kind of infographic with human health and well-being at the centre, acknowledging that all 16 SDGs, the other 16, are foundations of human health and well-being, whether they're social foundations, economic foundations, or environmental foundations. At MSDI, John Thwaites, Rod Glover, Cameron Allen and colleagues established a process some years ago, Transforming Australia, which was really about downscaling the SDGs into an Australian context. And if you compare the indicators in Transforming Australia, shown here, across the 17, with what's in Measuring What Matters, it's quite striking that there is less attention to the environmental dimensions in Measuring What Matters at the moment. There's some attention, but perhaps not enough attention. And if we look at that in more detail, you can see there in red at the bottom, key gaps, SDGs 2, 6 and 14, food and nutrition, water and oceans in particular. And of course, today on The Conversation, the headline story is about the Great Barrier Reef. And in Measuring What Matters, we have a new indicator on Great Barrier Reef hard coral cover. And you can see here we're off track. We have an indicator around life on land, total forest area. Again, we've got more work to do. And importantly, our broader impact of the way we live in Australia on ecosystems beyond our national borders, which is not always attended to in this kind of policy conversation. We tend to focus on national metrics. We don't think about the spillovers, and Aaron Ema's going to take us in that direction in a moment. So my final slide, so what? The Anthropocene requires us to change our mindset. Naomi Klein's book 10 years ago, This Changes Everything. We absolutely must change the way we think about well-being. Demonstrably, we need to strengthen the focus on well-being of planet in Measuring What Matters. This will enable attention to the well-being of future generations in a more considered way. And importantly, also enable attention to well-being elsewhere through thinking about spillovers. And finally, more specific points from yesterday. What are the implications of this thinking for the nexus between Measuring What Matters and state of environment reporting in Australia, and the Minister's mention of the new ABS, Expanded General Social Survey. So thanks very much for your attention, and look forward to discussing this as we proceed through the session. Cheers.